Let's start by defining what a belief is.
A thought that has been repeated for a long time until it has become automatic.
Is it conscious or unconscious?
It is usually unconscious. And during the 60s, they realized that they were inserting images between frames that the conscious brain did not detect, but that the subconscious was able to detect. But then we learned some concerning things. We must be cautious.
But can we incorporate beliefs throughout our entire life? Yes.
Fortunately, yes, because there is a very powerful thing. Borja, and it is...
Why do we believe things that directly harm us?
The brain avoids leaving its comfort zone.
So are we more emotional than rational? Undoubtedly, yes. What do you think infidelity is fundamentally due to?
I believe it's a combination of several factors.
Quickly leaves the body?
Broken heart syndrome is a heart condition that causes the body to suffer.
Then, some will call it luck. Is the unfaithful always the executioner and the deceived the victim?
I believe there are nuances there.
Begoña del Campo, how are you? Welcome, better than yesterday.
Hello, Borja. I was really looking forward to being here with you.
Me too. I also wanted to hear from you. I've been listening to you on social media for a long time, but I wanted to hear you in person. I'm going to ask you first, well, if you want, introduce yourself and then tell me what drives you to disseminate.
Well, my name is Begoña del Campo. I was born in Mallorca, and during this life, I have had many lives within one life. It's one of the phrases that I sometimes say, and that characterizes me because I have been reinventing myself a lot as life has been flowing. I'm very much about flowing. I'm very much about adapting. In this latest stage of life, I am dedicating myself to dissemination because I have the feeling that there is a hunger for knowledge. There is a lot of unhappiness. The human being is sad, is lost, disoriented, and when they understand what is happening to them, it is a way to calm, to heal, and to reassure. My vital sense today is to disseminate, learn, and democratize what I am learning.
How long have you been disseminating?
Just over half a year.
It's just been amazing. Because, of course, we didn't know you. I had never met you. You just appeared. And suddenly I saw you on a bunch of podcasts, which shows that you are a very hard worker.
There's a reel of yours that I saw recently, which I thought was wonderful. And I said, it represents me a lot. It's an image of you.
Career, they show up.
Several images that you say. Then some will call it luck or something like that. It's work and it's passion.
Passion characterizes. It shows that you have been communicating, if not disseminating, for a long time, because that ultimately shows the feature is now available, but it's been in development for a while.
Yes. I also have that innate gene from my father. He was a teacher, and I have been a teacher for years. And yes, I have taught classes, and I am very interested in being understood. When I explain something, I look at the person, and I have this need to be understood. And then my mind goes very fast when it comes to giving examples, but what is being disseminated on a large scale is relatively recent, just a few months ago, but I have been speaking in public for longer.
Great. Well, let's get started. One of the central topics you address in your dissemination is the issue of beliefs, which I am also personally very interested in because I believe they totally shape our lives. And let's start by defining what a belief is.
Well, Borja, a belief is a thought that has been repeated for a long time until it has been automated and entered into your belief system or your mental database. Like something that you don't need to consciously bring up, but your brain proposes it to you automatically. That is a belief, would be an automated thought. That would be the belief.
A thought only that can later be derived or not into a behavior or an action, but a priori, an automated thought. Something like in the field of computing, like an automatic order, a programming.
Could it be that you have downloaded a program? The brain learns, I will tell you, in two main ways. One, through the hypnologic states of brain waves, which is how young children learn up to the age of 7. And then through repetition, which is how we adults learn. So let me give you an example that I sometimes draw from my past experience as a driving instructor. So I tend to give examples related to that. When you learn to drive, at first, you have to think consciously. Now I lower the clutch pedal, then raise it while simultaneously giving gas. You have to consciously think about all these movements. There comes a time, and I checked it in a way. I asked the student in question, I asked him something that required elaborating an answer. And then I already took it out from what it is, let's say, being present in the hand-foot movement. At that moment, I realized if the person twisted, deviated, if it had been automated, then that program had been downloaded. Well, that is a belief. It's something that, based on repetition, you generate neural connections, new neural circuits that make you no longer need to be aware of that. The brain, being highly efficient, aims to automate your actions as quickly as possible to
not have it.
to strive. It's a perfect machine, a brutal machine. So, of course, it tends to automate. And those are the beliefs. Those programs that we download, while some are fantastic, over 60% are entirely counterproductive. So here comes the magic of reprogramming.
It also completely connects to the realm of habits and their formation. Ultimately, this is reflected in behavior and actions. Is the generation of these beliefs conscious, unconscious, both?
It's usually unconscious, that is, you keep hearing. For children aged 0 to 7, their activities involve. There is no belief system that questions what comes from outside. They accept everything they hear without question. When we are adults, from the age of 7, rather, this belief system is implemented, which would be like a kind of border between the part, let's say, of the unconscious world and the conscious part. So we usually interject them without being aware of them. In the case of children, they don't question it. In the case of adults, it is true that this belief system protects you. That is, if you right now want to modify one of my beliefs, or you want me to interject a belief, I have a belief system that can at any given moment question what you want to convey to me or are conveying to me.
If not, we would be completely at the mercy of countless inputs. And of the world, also of the industry, that wants to instill in us beliefs of buy this, which often does not happen.
Now, it depends on what advertising is prohibited. But during the 60s or so, they realized that they were inserting images between frames of commercials that the conscious brain, the conscious part, the neocortex, did not detect, but that at a subconscious level, that is your body, your subconscious part was able to detect. They could not only detect, but also condition, allowing them to interject beliefs as needs, which is a bit the issue of advertising, creating needs.
Sure, absolutely. And continuing with the topic of advertising and connecting it with what you've said about children, it's even more crucial to limit those impacts on children since, as you've said, they incorporate beliefs in an almost unfiltered way, right? That is, everything they hear, they absorb like a sponge. So we have to be careful.
Be very careful with them. It's amazing. Look, we do the best we can, okay? I mean, that's for starters. But we can't protect them 100% from all the inputs that aren't so kind to them. But yes, as much as we can modulate those external inputs, much better. I mean, the issue of controlling the use of screens, the movies they watch. In the past, we watched anything without restrictions. Growing up in Kabul, all I saw was violence. And then the images of romantic love, which also greatly conditions the person anyway.
The Disney world, all the Disney culture,
has done a lot of damage. Then this topic has been reinvented because it's true that now the Disney movies, I who have grandchildren and sometimes watch them with them, well, nothing to do with it. That is now, well, I don't know. There's a movie about a bull that talks about how to protect animals. So it's like they give animals an identity that makes children see them in a different way. They take great care with that issue. But when I was little or when my children were small, it was tremendous.
And throughout life, are there critical periods in which beliefs are incorporated? You've already said that childhood is one of them, but can we incorporate beliefs throughout our entire life?
Yes, fortunately, because beliefs are not erased, they are replaced. This is a very powerful thing, Borja. So thank goodness, because if not, we would be totally stamped in childhood, and in adulthood, we would have no freedom of maneuver. And this is not the case. Fortunately, we cannot erase. A program cannot be erased. It can be replaced by another one that is more adapted to the person you currently are. Because we carry beliefs that are wonderful, or we carry programs, or we have installed programs that are very good. We learn to walk and we spend our whole life walking. That is, it's a program that is super functional, but then we learned other things that are not so good. And so what we have to do is detect them and change them, that is, replace them with others. In the end, what the brain does is propose the thoughts that you use the most. When you think a lot about one thing, about something, the brain recognizes the usefulness and efficiency of certain thought patterns and behaviors, deeming them as functional and beneficial to adopt. So I'm going to send it again. And in a situation, an external input, 10 will always send you, or most of the time will send you, that thought that considers it is timely based on how often you have used it. That's why the mother of reprogramming is repetition.
It's repetition.
Repeat. Who do you want to be? Repeat it until you become that person you want to be. That's super strong, super powerful. When a human being understands it, there's a before and after. Borja.
Absolutely. That's great. Repeat, repetition, key point. Good. How do our beliefs shape our behavior? Let's give some examples.
Look, imagine beliefs are absolutely decisive when it comes to marking or defining your observable reality. Using the iceberg metaphor, imagine that the visible part is your life, your behaviors, your world. That visible part, your reality. Let's call it that is what you see. Below, at the very bottom of this iceberg would be the beliefs. Depending on your beliefs, so will be your thoughts. Depending on your thoughts, so will be your emotions. And depending on your emotions, so will be your behavior. And depending on your behavior, so will be your reality. Observable. That is, if what I want is to change what surrounds me, my observable reality. The first thing I have to do is change my beliefs. Because if I'm going to change my thoughts, it's very difficult. It's fighting against nature. It's swimming against the current.
That most are unconscious and we have very few conscious thoughts.
Very few. And we believe that many times, no, I did this from a rational point of view, right? I mean, many times there has been a decision behind it, unconscious, which then you consciously, then you argue why you did it, but you had already decided. Neuroscience is progressing rapidly.
You made excuses later, but your mind was already made up. This
has been rational. It has been a rational operation, but your brain, that is your unconscious part, had already decided 2 seconds before. How do we know this? Through skin conductance, through electrocardiograms, etc.
It's measurable.
It's measurable. Can it be measured? That is, science is realizing that the body is often the mind. That is, the mind is not exclusively from a brain-centric point of view, but it is the body. Often there are experiments that determine that there is one that is brutal, where images are put on a screen. This is from the Harvard Institute. A screen is put up and the subjects are shown pleasant and unpleasant images. They realize that the heart, a few tenths, I don't remember how long, seconds, less than a second before, changes the way it beats. It gets lost. For example, with pleasant images, you enter more into cardiac coherence, and with more unpleasant images, the heart becomes more disordered.
Decreases.
The variability
of the heart rate, right? Exactly right. Okay.
How interesting.
We'll talk about intuition later and we'll come back to this topic. That
would be intuition. It's your body warning you.
And then Begoña, why do we believe things that directly harm us and we know they harm us, but we continue to believe them?
Because the brain doesn't want to leave that known comfort, even if it's unpleasant. The brain loves comfort because it's evolutionarily designed that way. From the African savannah of let's get food, let's survive so we don't get eaten by a predator. So it's completely oriented outward, and everything that means leaving, that bothers him. What he wants is comfort. So for that reason, even if it's bad, even if consciously he considers it bad, yet he is comfortable.
The typical, I prefer a known evil to a good good.
There are proverbs, there are things that grind us down. That's one that is... That's a heavy burden for us. It's also crucial to recognize that human behavior is far more complex than it appears. We have the limbic brain, where the amygdala is located, is the emotional center of the brain. We often decide from there, mostly from there. And then there's the neocortex, which is the conscious part that tells you, that gives you the explanation of why am I here if I'm not happy. But then on the other hand, the limbic brain, that more emotional part, as it is phylogenetically older, it has more strength. Imagine the limbic brain is in the amygdala, the center of emotions, and then there's the neocortex. If both of them got into a ring and started slapping each other, the amygdala would always win.
Because it's older, it is...
older, it has more...
connections, it is...
more powerful, it has more weight. So, of course, for that reason, many times, for example, when there is a sentimental breakup, the person is very clear. It is very clear. I'm not going back there as a joke. But then the brain sends him idyllic images to return to that story, no matter how much damage it did to him. And it's because there is one there. There comes a certain point where the neocortex directly says, I'm not going up with the amygdala. I don't fight with my amygdala anymore. I know it exists and will win, so I decide not to get in the ring. That's a boxing metaphor, but to understand a little about what our mental equipment is, our mental equipment absolutely determines us. When you know how you function, it's much easier for you to understand. And there are people who, when they tell me they're having a terrible time, I say, calm down, let's see. A breakup works at different paces. I mean, the heart goes a little slower than reason, which is the same as this thing I just explained about the amygdala. It's going to send you idyllic images so that you give it that chemistry again of dopamine, of oxytocin, of emotional bonds.
So are we more emotional than rational? Without a doubt, yes.
Yes. The newest part, the neocortex, has less weight in decision-making than the limbic brain, which is older. The emotional attachment and bonding aspects of humans reside there, causing tension and unhappiness at times. On one hand, we have that emotional memory that resides, I insist, in the limbic brain. And on the other hand, we have the neocortex, which is the part that makes you say, well, no, I want this way of living. I want this. That's where procrastination often comes from, for example. You consciously want to reach your goal, but unconscious impulses are pulling you in another direction. Then, now talking about what we are going deeper, there is the hypothalamus, which is the most primitive part. And so that's where Freud, who was also a neurologist, called it the id. He said that the id was there, in the part of the instinct, the instincts, the id.
Well, that's good. And the beliefs that limit us, can they be passed from generation to generation? In other words, is there such a thing as a legacy of beliefs? Toxic? Yes.
Science has recently corroborated the immense power of this development. We have always thought that beliefs came or we acquired them in childhood, but today science has shown that we also inherit beliefs, we inherit phobias, we inherit fears. Programs. Do we download programs that are not ours? This has been discovered in several experiments. Ayuas's task would be one and another also from Rachel Neruda. I think it's this woman who did a study with the descendants of the Holocaust, of the people who were in concentration camps and so on. And she realized that they had something observable, that they had a lower tolerance to stress, they had lower cortisol levels. And you say, well then, this means that cortisol not only accelerates when necessary, cortisol also modulates afterwards. The return to earth. It's like it would be the brake, that is, it's the accelerator, and at the same time it's also the brake. So what happens? They had downloaded the inherited program. That is, they had lower levels and less stress tolerance in their bodies than control people.
Interesting. Lower levels than the general population? Probably because they have been exposed to such brutal stressors that current stressors do not trigger a sufficient cortisol response.
Has it generated tolerance? Did their parents or grandparents' bodies generate stress tolerance? At some point, stress is like a superhero that is there to fight. Now imagine that this superhero is so stressed, pardon the redundancy, it is functioning so much, 24/7, that there comes a time when the body, for a matter of energy efficiency, reduces those levels. Because it's like if there's a fire and you have a firefighter to put them all out, or you bring out a legion of firefighters. And there comes a time when it gets out of hand.
Yes, it's a bit what happens with insulin resistance and insulin with a lot of things in hormones and human physiology. There's also a super interesting topic, which is the law of the self-fulfilling prophecy. Tell us a little, what is this about?
This is brutal, of course. If you think that person, imagine that I say to Borja, I'm going to fall terribly, then directly. I'm already feeling inhibited and thinking that he sees it and you think it's weirder, right? And then
I don't like him at all.
This happens, right? And then that prophecy is going to come through there. And it's because I'm suggesting to my brain to behave, or I behave in a certain way, and that's going to have consequences in my environment. So the self-fulfilling prophecy is brutal. It's very heavy, very powerful in psychology.
And basically it's that, well, what we've said, that if in the end your beliefs end up transforming into a reality, basically that's the definition is simple. That is, if I believe I'm going to be good at math, in the end, I'm going to change my behavior. I'm going to try harder. I'm going to like math more. I'm going to end up working on it more, and I'm going to be better at math.
Absolutely. That's it. That is, your beliefs are going to shape your behavior. If you believe things are going to go badly for you, they have gone badly. If you believe things are going to go well for you, they will.
Go well. This phenomenon, also known as the Pygmalion effect or Rosenthal effect, has been researched to determine its origins. Well, by the way, in a positive sense, it's called the Pygmalion effect. In a negative sense, it seems to be called the Golem effect. They have like two aspects there. And the Pygmalion effect comes from Greek mythology, where Pygmalion was a sculptor who made a beautiful statue of a woman, and he believed so fervently that it was going to become a real woman, the woman of his dreams. That by believing so much, Aphrodite granted him the wish, the goddess of love, and turned her into a real woman. And that's where the Pygmalion effect comes from.
How nice and beautiful. I wasn't aware of that.
Cool. I didn't either, but well, I didn't know the story. Doing a bit of research. And now I'm going to ask you something that might touch on the metaphysical, but I'm interested in asking you, do you believe in fate, or do we create our own destiny as we go through life?
I am of the opinion that we create our destiny with our dreams, our actions, our goals. In my opinion, and because I am a very free person, I am a person who likes to think that I have control of my life, that we are the ones who make our destiny. However, I also flow a lot with things, with opportunities. That is, I believe that life, there are two ways to see life threatened: as an opportunity. So I always see it as an opportunity, and I have a very active filter to detect all the opportunities that life gives me. I believe everything happens for a reason, and there is a higher order, or there is an intelligence. We call it universe, God, or whatever. Each one that is absolutely beyond our control. And the very interesting thing is also that we can hardly explain reality. We observe a very small part of reality, a tiny part of reality. If you stop to think, the electromagnetic frequency we capture is nothing. It's 0.003.35% of what's around us. We humans have very limited senses. And then, apart from what we can perceive with our senses, our brain also has a filter, which is the ascending reticular activating system. Of everything we could perceive, we perceive an infinitesimal percentage. That is, in the end, we have very little information. I understand that we hardly know anything. Therefore, believing or not believing in fate, I am very free, I insist, so I work a lot to create my own destiny, but I also let myself go. And I also believe that when life puts something in front of you, never, as we don't know, you have to go for it.
You've mentioned something that interests me. The role of the ascending reticular activating system then to filter reality and keep the most functional inputs, or what?
Yes, like for a matter of efficiency, also energetic of the brain. The ascending reticular activating system is a filter that what it does is capture the inputs of reality that are useful for you. This is trained. So when you look for opportunities, you do it based on this filter, this reticular system, based on how you have it, oriented or educated.
That is, they highlight you, this filter system. Some impulses above others, depending on what you have been able to work on, your beliefs. Exactly.
The belief system seeks opportunities.
And why are there people who incessantly repeat harmful patterns in work, in relationships, in friendships, in love? They are the typical person who comes out of a very toxic relationship and finds a very similar profile again and repeats the story and then repeats the story.
I think life will continually put Borja in your path. What you need to be able to transcend those beliefs or those limiting patterns. So that's very powerful, and also what the brain wants. It's the known, as we said before, the popular sayings, that sometimes there are super destructive beliefs based on that popular sayings precisely. So the fact of getting the brain out of that limiting belief or that repetitive pattern is going to put you in. Are you comfortable? You don't want to be challenged? That's the point.
Okay. Is there any limiting belief that you see in your patients or that is especially common, that is very repetitive?
Not being enough?
Not being enough?
Not being good enough, not being smart enough, not being a good enough person, not being enough in general, being enough in general, needing external validation all the time. To be able to strengthen that self-concept, not being enough, I believe it is the most widespread belief.
And where does that come from? If you had to say, where does it come from? I believe that
it comes from the universal fear of being rejected or not being loved. Those are the two universal fears. The fear of not being loved or being rejected and separated from others. So the person strives to be good enough to be loved so they won't be rejected. Does realizing this require maturity? And when you realize that you don't need any kind of external validation, at that moment you become
unstoppable, or
whatever, you don't care. There you can put and deploy all your talents.
it's hard to get out of that belief and not need any kind of validation.
It's difficult, but it can be achieved. There comes a time in life, and that is maturity really, where you don't need external validation because you have self-concept. Of course, you know who you are, but then nothing weighs you down, neither down nor up. You don't need to be told you're the best, nor do you need or care to be told so. To be told that you're the worst. Doesn't there come a time when you become unstoppable because of that? Well, when you expose yourself, you have to assume that there will be factors, that there will be people that lift you up, that put you on a pedestal, and people who put you down. You don't have to let yourself be carried away by either one. That is, you have good, I'm not this either, I know who I am.
While there's much discussion about the negative aspects, haters and criticism, and not getting carried away by them, I believe there's less talk about the other side, positive, because objectively speaking, creators generally receive far more positive validation than negative feedback. It's also dangerous because while it seems to only have positive aspects, it can be risky to let yourself go for that, or need it, as you say, or do nothing if it's not for that positive validation. It confuses you a lot and leads you down dangerous paths.
Yes, if you don't have enough maturity yet, it can lead you down very dangerous paths. Stagnation is believing you have reached your ultimate potential, but life is a continuous learning process. We are never where we can end up being. That is, no matter how well people put you, no matter how much they elevate you when talking about you, you have to be aware that you have to keep learning. So neither one nor the other. You don't have to let yourself be carried away. It's true that most people always... These are positive reviews and comments, but I insist that you must stay grounded and know who you are. In the end, people bring out what they carry inside. I always say it. People bring out what they carry inside. People who tell you nice things do so because they have something nice inside. And people who tell you very unpleasant things. You say, poor thing, I tell you seriously, it doesn't affect me in the slightest, but I of today. It's not myself from 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I might have taken the bait and gotten angry or been bothered or felt hurt. Currently, regardless of how unpleasant their words are, I know they're not referring to me, they're actually talking about themselves. So I don't engage. Sometimes I try to correct that, but there are times when I do engage. Irony, I try to use irony.
Humor and irony are always good tools, yes.
When I think about success, I get excited and say, yes, 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 yes.
Good learning. Do beliefs affect our physical health?
Yes, a lot. Of course, if you have a belief that life, the world is hostile, life is apocalyptic, etc., your body will secrete cortisol from the adrenal glands, which will have various effects, that your immune system is more weakened. In short, of course, beliefs are undoubtedly determinant. When it comes to...
an extreme example that I hadn't planned comes to mind, but it just occurred to me. I seem to remember that there were some indigenous tribes that took the nocebo effect to the extreme, to such an extent that several deaths had been reported due to the nocebo effect. Maybe from a shaman who told them, you're going to die without any other scientific support, but you're going to die. Tuesday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon he arrived. They arrived on Tuesday at 4 post-meridium and died. It occurs to me as the most extreme example of beliefs about physical health, brutal.
That is brutal. And that's why you have to be very careful when, for example, something is diagnosed. The mind is incredibly powerful, so the nocebo effect can reach extreme levels. In other words, could you die from this? Well, there have been autopsies of people who have died because they were diagnosed with throat cancer. For example, one that I read in a study, and in the autopsy, he had nothing.
It was a false diagnosis, exactly.
But beliefs can become so powerful. The mind is a powerful tool that must be used wisely, for both good and bad.
Deviating slightly, but why? Are there people who fervently believe in conspiracy theories or totally extravagant ideas without any empirical or scientific basis, but they believe them very, very, very strongly?
Well, often these people who believe in this type of
conspiracy theories
are paranoid. They enjoy feeling part of an exclusive group. For instance, imagine Borja. You and I know that the earth is
flat and the rest are fools who don't the rest.
Poor thing, can't give more. So that makes you feel more belonging, that is, to a select group of people who are even above the rest because they are bad and because you have more access to. Paranoid personalities are more prone to seek them. Morbidity is also one of the issues. The brain always tends to focus more on the weirdest things than on the simplest things. That is because of a matter of, this, that has happened. The gossip that everyone.
Yes. So it's something about belonging to a group, belonging to an anti-system discourse, and being in possession of the truth, of the
truth that the rest do not.
Okay. I can understand it, but sometimes it's hard for me because of the ideas that people come to believe and defend, right? Conspiracy theories are not limited to flat Earth. They now cover a wide range of topics.
No, but also social media really reinforces that. If you frequently view phishing content, the algorithm will persistently recommend phishing-related items to you. And if you look at things about a certain conspiracy theory, then the algorithm will keep showing you all of that. And you say, my goodness, all the time, the social networks, I don't know, the people, how can they not? Social networks are causing significant polarization among people. It's clear that social media platforms are contributing to this issue. All the time you're on Instagram or TikTok or wherever you are, and all the time you're seeing the same thing, you say, I don't understand how people aren't realizing what I'm constantly seeing. This leads to significant polarization. Well, because you can think in white, I'm going to think in black. And it turns out they don't propose a gray. They will propose a white. And this causes more and more polarization in society and also more fanatical people.
Yes. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about faith in God. Why do you think believers in general are happier? Even in the studies that are done, they have lower mortality and are protected against some diseases. Why?
I believe, although obviously there is no right or wrong answer, I believe it's due to their sense of continuity. That is, there is a sky, there is a something, then there is a something. It's like a sense of belonging to, a sense of trust that there is a supreme something, a higher intelligence that governs all of this. And there is a sense of community. The human being, we are made to work as a team to build community, a living system such as the body, the cells. Everything works together.
And also in the sense, I don't know if disclaiming is the term, but I think it relieves the soul and the head much more. The feeling that everything happens. Because there is a divine will that has made it happen this way. To take responsibility of my relationship has ended because I did this wrong or I didn't take care of myself and I got sick. If we delegate that personal responsibility, well, man, we breathe more. It's not the same. This has been my fault. Well, this has been my fault to say.
Look, there is a higher divine order that has made this happen this way, and it's not my thing. Humans have a strong tendency to pass the buck.
But, well, it's something. A question that doesn't have, as you say, a clear answer. But we leave it to the audience to ponder why believers in general have better health, because this is so. This is seen in multiple studies. What about religious faith? Faith in a God that protects. I am very interested from the perspective of neuropsychology, of beliefs, and so on. Very cool. We're going to get into reprogramming, your star topic. Can we then reprogram our beliefs? Fortunately, Vale, how do we do it?
Well, as I told you a while ago, the brain doesn't know how to forget, but it knows how to replace one program with another program. So what happens is that when you internalize a belief, when you are constantly repeating a thought until it becomes automatic, your brain automatically proposes neural pathways in response to certain inputs without your conscious request. When you want that in response to that same input, your thought doesn't go there but goes somewhere else. In that case, you have to give it this new path. It's as if we were making a new road. The brain tends to follow familiar paths because they are well established and frequently used throughout one's life. So now you're telling it that it has to go down a narrow, small path. So at first, it's going to be very hard. You're going to have to repeat until, as you stop using, this one disappears and the new one becomes the route in which your thoughts are going to flow. In response to that input, that would be the mental reprogramming. That is giving your brain a new belief which displaces the old one, which no longer represents you, which no longer serves you. Beliefs are always useful. That is, when you, at a given moment, imagine you are a person who in a relationship is distrustful and you say, why? Well, for fear of abandonment, for fear of betrayal, for fear. And why? Well, because as a child, maybe you were afraid that your mother would leave or abandon you. And you extrapolate that to the adult relationship. But today you think about it consciously and rationally and say, this makes no sense. This belief does not represent me. This does not serve me at all. So there we have to detect which belief is sabotaging you. Let's implement a new belief that is more functional by repeating.
So is it self-dialogue? Is it really repetition, or
is there more? That is, there is more because there are two critical moments throughout the circadian cycle of the 24 hours of the human being. One is upon awakening and the other upon entering sleep. There, the brain drops to alpha theta brain waves. That is, waves at different frequencies. It's as if a door opens to the unconscious part, to the unconscious world. So that's when we interject some programs. We download some programs based on repetition. For example, what I do are audios, which I make with my voice, with a certain music that is studied. The silences are also studied to, between words, force the brain to go blank. Is everything studied? You listen to those audios every single night. After 2 or 3 nights have passed, a change occurs. Well, people suddenly sleep like babies. It's amazing. After 2 to 3 weeks, you begin to notice something magical about your surroundings, particularly your environment. I know what's happening to you, but you don't take it. Because one can suggest oneself at a given moment and say, oh, I'm better. Well, very well. If you report higher levels of satisfaction, it has already been worth it. But when your environment is telling you there is something there, isn't there? So mental reprogramming consists mainly of using those 2 windows of entry into the unconscious world through those brain waves.
but then they put them on before going to sleep and fall asleep with it?
I've been doing it for a long time. I fall asleep listening to them.
Okay, with headphones, right? No, without headphones or without headphones?
I put the phone, and to the people I help with this, I say, put it on the bedside table, let it ring, and then you keep hearing it, and you stay. I never finish hearing them.
The type of brainwaves were, if I remember correctly, the beta, which are the wakefulness alpha, which are states of deep concentration, of meditation. Below were the theta, and then the gamma, which are deep dreams.
Exactly, right?
Okay. And we try to get those inputs into alpha zeta. Alpha zeta.
There's the window there, so that's how that stays like cooking in the brain. It's like when you watch a movie or experience a strong stimulus before sleep, and your brain incorporates it into your dream. Is it because you were suggestible? We are more suggestible an hour before sleep, so we must be cautious about what we consume just before bed. Movies, social networks,
TikTok.
and all that. That's bad, of course.
Bad. Well, it can be good if the content is appropriate, but it's usually not the most suitable. But if it's content that empowers you, maybe,
Or motivating.
or such, maybe to the,
Better. What happens is that, of course, the blue light from the phone also.
and so on.
Light significantly impacts melatonin production, which you are well aware of. Just because of that, I'm very careful with my phone, for example. I set limits for myself because it's happening to all of us. It absorbs you.
A peak of energy that absorbs you.
Absolutely. It's an attention kidnapper. It's designed to completely kidnap us.
Is it true what you were saying? That in the end, the content of dreams does not always, but often reflect experiences lived during the day, especially the negative ones when they are nightmares. I at least do have that feeling. It reflects something that happened to me during the day that I didn't like, or
Some thought.
worrying.
Does it bring it to your mind? Recurring thoughts, above all, because of course we are prepared to fight against threats. So, does it tend to bring you those negative thoughts more?
I don't know where. I read recently that one of the theories about sleep is that sleep aims to give coherence to the narrative of your day to day. It's like an emotional glue that aims for what you've lived to be understood coherently. Understood as a story that really has a meaning, give them meaning. And that's why sleep is important for emotional health and so on. And here, this would link to the fact that reducing sleep increases the risk of psychiatric illness.
Absolutely. The topic of sleep carries a lot of weight. The other day I read, I can't remember where, that in the Victorian era, people kept diaries. It was like now with social media, well, in the Victorian era, people got into that. So that's why there are records of sleep hours from that time, about 10 hours. They slept an average of 10 hours.
Wow, she would catch it, wouldn't she?
When the light bulb was invented, the story fluctuates between 8 and 9. Down. Was the television invented or implemented in the 1950s? It is reduced to about 8 hours, and with social networks, it is dropping below 7. With social networks. Now people sleep less. Well, not me, but most people sleep less than 7 hours. This means that the lymphatic system, which is the one that throws out the brain's trash, doesn't have time to do all that necessary cleaning of all the neurotoxic products that are generated in the brain. So it's extremely important to understand the need for sleep and setting boundaries for ourselves. Borja, I tell you, I have to set boundaries for myself.
I struggle with myself. I believe that any dedicated content creator who doesn't set limits will end up having problems.
You have problems. You have to set limits. It's true that I use the phone exclusively for my work, but you have to be careful not to give yourself that explanation.
But do you justify with that? No, it's not that I'm working.
Yes, you have to have. Now, while I was saying it, I was realizing that you also have to be careful with that justification and set limits for yourself. I have clear limits. For instance, I never take my phone with internet to bed. I turn off mobile data and Wi-Fi. I'm in the dining room, imagine reading, watching something, and I say, go to sleep, then off mobile data, off Wi-Fi. If someone wants to, they'll call you, but nowadays nobody calls anyone. That is, it's not that you become incommunicado, but you can put the phone at night with volume. If you don't have internet, nobody's going to bother you. I have been doing it for a long time without bothering anyone. So in that way, you limit yourself, you self-limit. And I can put on the audios to be able to do the mental reprogramming. That is, even if I don't have internet, the audios do work because I have them in voice notes. So I put it on there.
Is there any shred of scientific truth in the law of attraction? That romantic idea that became very popular with these books, which in the end falls into self-help, but which had slightly pseudoscientific ideas. But in the end, then some parts resonate with some of the things we are saying. That is, can we in some way co-create our reality, or simply what we do is to detect patterns more efficiently that get us what we want? Yes?
Yes, well, the issue of what is the law of attraction and so on, there's a Yankee showbiz. When The Secret came out, which I think was in the year 2006 or so, they released 700,000, but the first one was already there. They got so creative and so exorbitant with that they charged. A quite elegant theory, which is the theory of quantum physics, which explains how I perceive or how subatomic physics works. How does matter work? So, of course, there is some truth there. The thing is that it was very distorted. Now, there is a resurgence. If you've noticed people talking, even I in some podcasts have also talked about this, about quantum physics, very down to earth, because it's not easy to understand. As we discussed earlier, and as Einstein noted, we can barely describe reality, perceiving only a small part of the whole, like the tail of a lion. From our very limited human perceptual system, we can hardly explain anything. Therefore, when I hear any theory, I am a person who has a very open mind. You never say that's not true or that doesn't exist or what the hell are you saying? What can be said is that it has not yet been proven, but science is starting to prove things that we need to pay attention to. Why quantum physics or the law of attraction? In this case, which is the most commercial name, that was given more for show and fair. Yankee also has its scientific connotation to give it a more scientific point of view. For example, the issue of whether I visualize something. If I start to visualize, I want €1 million. Well, girl, if you don't get moving, it's not going to appear out of nowhere, that's for sure, if I visualize images. What I do is activate this system we were talking about earlier, which is the ascending reticular activating system. That is, I activate the reality filter to detect more opportunities. So is this science? Yes, this is science. It doesn't mean that you're going to get €1 million raining down on you, but what you're going to do is...
Do you come up with ideas to start a business, to establish relationships? You start to open up paths, don't you?
Do you start to cook? The creativity?
The important thing afterwards is to travel those paths. I believe that people here stay in the previous to travel it.
Exactly. People who dream but then do not act. So you have to have a passion. You are a guy with a lot of passion, and it shows just like me. We are passionate people. When we set our minds on something, nothing can stop us from achieving it. When one has a clear vision of their destination and a strong passion for it, visualization becomes effortless. For sure, I have done that.
Intuitively, since my teenage years, I've always prioritized hydration without explicitly labeling it as such. In my head, well, in meditations or whatever, I visualized what I wanted, but it almost came out on its own. How can I not get excited about the image of what I want? And it's true that afterwards, I don't know what name to call it, but life leads you
In a way,
quite curious, right? Through paths that often, not always, but often end where you wanted.
to be very exciting. Also, Borja, when you wake up in the morning and say, let's see what life brings me today, you live life with expectation, excitement, and enthusiasm. It's just that. It's just that you detect things, you detect opportunities.
Much more interesting. This type of life is much more interesting.
And yes, of course, visualization puts you in that tune. Besides, not only that, but if you are giving your brain the vision, the image that something is going to go well for you, you take off pressure. Imagine that you have to give a lecture to 1,000 people. Then, on one hand, the anxiety of fear will appear. But if you visualize that you are doing it well, visualize that they congratulate you when you finish, visualize all that. Your brain, when you have to go out and give the lecture, has already done it. Because the brain does not distinguish whether what it visualizes is true or not. Have you experienced it or not?
This method is also used in other evidence-based fields, such as sports and motor imagery, which was discussed by an expert here. It is used for training, that is, a basketball player can train mentally, throwing a three-pointer or a free throw. It has been demonstrated to be effective and functional, although it's not identical to shooting a three-pointer. Really? But those motor patterns are honed when we imagine them, so probably in the face of an event, a situation that generates anxiety, fear, well, yes, also that's something, almost, that mental practice. I do it in sports too, before a congress. Does it lower those revolutions a lot?
Absolutely. I mean, your brain has already experienced it. It doesn't send you because fear is there to protect you. The brain, it sends you the emotion of fear so that you don't do something that it considers could put you in danger. And what danger could there be in you messing up a conference? Well, there could be social rejection. In a conscious way, you don't realize it, but your brain has its own path, which is that you're telling it to calm down as if it were a child. You say, no, relax, this will go well. And you visualize it repeatedly. And then it doesn't send you fear anymore because it has lived through that. That is familiar to it. So,
of course, visualization is super powerful.
It's super powerful, me too. It's something that I didn't start doing consciously, but I learned it. There are people who are already like that, for example, like you or like Arnold Schwarzenegger, for example. Biography, he tells that he was not aware of what he was doing, but that he noticed that this man has also lived several lives in one life, and what lives has he lived?
Since he was in this little village, which I don't know if it was Graz in Austria, when he was 15 or 16 years old, he already visualized himself winning the Olympia. I mean, it's beautiful. It's very beautiful. When you look at it in retrospect, it's even more beautiful. Because those stories motivate me a lot, because it's a very recurring pattern of the dreamer. At the moment of starting that dream, everyone laughs at him or her, and then ends up executing it step by step.
There is a future self who is very proud of you. I always believe that. I believe there is a future self that pulls us towards where he is and is super proud. You're doing well, keep going, you're doing well. It's your self-motivator. It is
very beautiful. The term subconscious is usually quite criticized within the scientific community. Is it a term that has scientific validity, or what exactly do we mean when we mention it?
Yes, the subconscious is used more at a colloquial level.
Word.
Subconscious. But the unconscious, that one does have scientific backing. It's that part of your brain that you don't have voluntary access to, and that obviously operates below your level of consciousness. The scientific community agrees without doubt or further discussion. So I sometimes use the word subconscious, sometimes I use the word that is more colloquial, but it doesn't have that scientific evidence backing it up.
But the public understands it. But the
public understands it more, right? And the unconscious, yes, obviously, and yes, that what they call implicit memory, but in the end, it is the unconscious.
That's a merged part of the iceberg, right?
Indeed, it is that part of the iceberg, that limbic brain, especially the one that directs 95% of our behaviors. It is.
That is said soon. Basically, it directs our life.
It directs our life. We can't even imagine what I mentioned earlier. The fact that your brain proposes thoughts that you execute and that you believe you have done consciously. But what you're doing is justifying a decision you've already made. Did you decide that 2 seconds earlier? Of course, now science is starting to show how your body, a short time before, is already noticing changes. You're not deciding from reason, you're deciding from a much deeper part.
From intuition. This links to what I was going to ask you. What is intuition from a psychological perspective?
Intuition is wonderful, all the advancements in this topic. Intuition is your body warning you. The subconscious or the unconscious detects things that your conscious part cannot detect due to a matter of, once again, energy deficiency. That is, the brain can capture a series of inputs at a conscious level, but at an unconscious level, it detects, imagine, many more. What happens when you suddenly stand in front of a person and say, is there something in this person that
I don't.
like? Is there something that bothers me? I don't know. Is it your subconscious that has picked up nuances that you haven't picked up? Or, for example, someone who contacts me and says, I think my partner is unfaithful. And you say, well, but let's see. Do you have objective data that corroborates that suspicion? No, but don't choose something. And you say they're messing with her for sure? Yes, well.
There will be times when I can't imagine. It's strange.
That no. Why will I speak when there is a mutual understanding of time? Is there something unnoticed in a long-term relationship, whether it's been 5, 10, or 20 years, despite an established understanding between the partners? It's because your conscious brain, your conscious part, doesn't notice it, doesn't see it, because it's much more limited. However, your unconscious part, which is unlimited, practically that 95% is detecting that if a mobile movement, so if little details,
Subtleties?
which then, of course, are sensations. And it's your body warning you that there's something that doesn't add up. That's intuition. Intuition is the warning that sets the precedent before you.
Can we train to listen to that intuition? Can we become more sensitive to intuition? Yes.
Through the interoceptive system. Being more in touch with the sensations that your body sends you, that is the sensations in the stomach, that feeling of tightness or in the higher shoulders. It's like, let's see. What am I feeling? Emotions are going to indicate, emotions are the great messengers of how your mind is.
And do you personally always listen to your intuition whenever you can?
Yes, now I do. Before I didn't, but now I really do. I've learned to,
Over time?
of my journey, before I didn't, but throughout my life journey, I have indeed learned. When something is warning me, I listen to my body and how I feel. Yes, like that.
But when it comes to making decisions, can intuition also be wrong or not?
Yes, of course, you may have suggested, you can consciously, I have sought an explanation that you attribute to your subconscious. You can turn it around, right? But yes. We usually pay attention to sensations without biases, which is much more complicated. It's the most normal approach. Is that intuition is right. That's the most common.
And how do they reconcile reason and intuition? That is, can they collaborate?
They collaborate when reason becomes aware of this intuition's existence. At that moment, there can be a conscious self-observation to that part or to that more inaccessible world. And the body is constantly communicating with the brain, constantly the heart, the digestive system. There is communication all the time.
But we've mentioned it before. I would like to go a little deeper. Why the topic of heart coherence, or the work of the Heart Math Institute, also the brain heart coherence. What does this institute do, and why has it gained so much relevance?
It's gaining popularity due to the studies on the bidirectional communication between the brain and the heart. The heart has about 40,000 neurons, so it's like a mini brain. And there are impulses, and it has been seen that there is more information going from the heart to the brain than the other way around.
From bottom to top?
Yes. For example, what stress does is make the heart lose coherence. That is, there is no rhythm, there is no coherence in the beats. This leads to a loss of coherence, including in the brain. When the heart is coherent, the brain becomes coherent due to this communication. This means that the waves will be lower, they will be in an alpha rhythm even, and there the prefrontal cortex is activated, it lights up. However, when it is incoherent, the back part of the brain is more active. Functional magnetic resonance imaging shows that alpha waves are lost when the brain is incoherent. So this brain-heart communication is very interesting. In addition, the perception of the world occurs when the brain and the heart are in coherence. It has been given as a stalemate in a few milliseconds in which the heart and the brain are in communication.
And how can that coherence between the two be increased?
Heart coherence is what you do through breathing, for example. Modulating the breathing. Mindfulness is also a very good way to make the heart coherent. Breathing is the anchor above all. When there is an incoherence or deregulation, such as when you are very accelerated or stressed. Besides, we notice it. We notice how the breath is more shallow, the breath changes. So when you are aware of that, you have to stop for a moment, pay attention to the body and focus on the breath. That is super powerful, super important. Very
cool topic. Let's discuss a topic you've covered extensively in your work, infidelity. It causes significant distress and suffering in the world. Has infidelity always existed?
Yes, probably yes, because there are internal impulses. So yes, of course.
And in all cultures, the most repressed, the most liberal?
I believe so. The issue is understanding the concept of fidelity. If we understand the concept of infidelity as breaking the couple's pact, well, there are cultures where there is no pact. So if there is no exclusivity pact, one is not unfaithful. That is, in the end, what is violated is the pact in societies where fidelity is a duty or monogamy is implemented.
Pacts that also come from a cultural or religious background of
many places.
That in many places, right?
Absolutely. That the thing is that people are having a really hard time right now because we have like a double standard. That is, the thing is that we have a culture that is still monogamous. But then, on the other hand, there is a lot of permissiveness in other ways and a lot of drive and many stimuli. And above all, a huge need for external validation. It's brutal, that need for external validation that humans have. So what happens? I could be very well with you in a relationship, but it turns out that as I'm being flattered on the other side, I'm there, and that's the problem.
Social networks and hyperconnectivity have once again contributed significantly to this.
Well, you can't imagine. The amount of people who talk to me is brutal. I mean, they are poor things.
Disoriented?
People are very
disoriented. Because
of course, until you say, let's see, but I'm giving it my all. But if I give my all to my partner and it's not enough, and they're constantly posting pictures.
The comparison, right? Also.
That comparison bias, that need for external validation again.
And the feeling that I think this also, once again, contributes a lot to what I just said about I could have something better to what I have continuously. I could have something better. And if this is good, it's good. But could I?
Could it be better? Yeah.
And in the end, it hurts. Yes, it does.
Yes, it hurts quite a bit.
What do you think infidelity is fundamentally due to? I mean, well, we're stating several factors, but to lack of impulse control, to lack of affection, to the hyperstimuli that we have mentioned, to lack of moral principles as it is often attributed.
I believe it is a sum of several factors. The ones you have said, you have mentioned, I believe the main ones. The amount of stimuli there is being people more economically self-sufficient. That means I can be alone, I can support myself. So if a person enters my life, it has to be to make me better. And then also that addiction to which she has sometimes also talked about, addiction to butterflies. To novelty, that kick that has its biological backing too. When you meet a person for a biological reason, you have the bonding hormones, oxytocin, vasopressin, all the dopamine, all that kick of neurotransmitters, that what they do is link you to that person. Eventually, that becomes unsustainable. We couldn't function if we were like that constantly. It lasts for a while, just long enough to bond. When that goes down, people think, oh, this is not him or this is not her.
Thought.
The veil is removed and then you are really seeing the other. Because, of course, all that rush of neurotransmitters makes you see a distorted image of the other. You
become obsessed. You
become obsessed. When the veil falls and you suddenly see the other, do you really say, oh, my mother, and now what do I do with this?
No.
I thought it was one way, but it's actually this way. Do you disagree? Besides, there's also the marketing phase, which is when you get to know the person. You obviously show your best face, not your miseries.
No, of course, you have to sell yourself, right?
I mean, I ask you, Borja, what do you like? And I also love watching football on a Sunday, lying on the
Couch and drinking.
beer with my buddies on the
Couch.
If you don't mention it, it won't sell. Then 6 months later, I warn Borja to be cautious.
They wasted.
And at first we went out and did interesting things, and now all the time. And then you say, isn't it? And it turns out that to that you add the ease there is to meet people.
Because the apps, but now even social networks.
Indeed, because social networks are the Satan scam apps. Also camouflaged, because there you get hit on by those who have a partner and those who don't. And then one thing I try to get people to understand is that they're not flattering you. They're just enjoying it, while they're ignoring 50,000 others. Well, of course. So people feel a
sense of exclusivity. I am the
best because there are 50 people hitting on me. And you look at the guy next to you watching football with his friends and you ask yourself, should I be with this one when I have 50 others behind me? But those 50 are also hitting on 500 others. So do we really need to be mature and realize that in the end, being in a relationship involves making decisions? And deciding means choosing one person. I choose you. Therefore, I have to give up the rest because that's what we have at a social level today. Another thing is that there are different agreements. Mind you, I don't staunchly defend monogamy. Everyone should do what they want. There are couples that have other agreements. And as long as the pact of loyalty is fulfilled, which for me is very important, that is, I am loyal to you. And what does being loyal imply? It's crucial to discuss a couple's agreements, which may seem implicit, but aren't always. Having an open conversation about this is very important. We must discuss it. That's what happens when the truth is revealed. Of all that, there are like 3 phases. That first phase in relationships, where the person is totally abducted with those neurochemicals. A second phase where you say, oh, my mother, what I have in front of me. And a third phase, and there you make a bet in the second phase. That is, there are 2 paths. Either you leave.
What do you say?
I won't bet on them. Despite their qualities, I know nobody's perfect. Their small cards are compatible with mine. It's going well.
Is super important, yes, because we all have little flaws. The key is the compatibility of those flaws.
Of course, there are people who say yes, but it's that he has this and this. But do you really think there is a human being who is going to be exactly as you want? No. What happens is that you have to see if those things that you do not like are powerful enough to hurt you. Now, if they are things that you say, look, it's like we are day and night. It's just that I love having a social life and this person is very calm. Maybe we should rethink the story. Then it would progress to a third phase where deeper long-term connections develop. It's unique. There's a saying that love begins when infatuation ends.
And there
is where true love really begins.
And then I think there's another generational factor that in this case I consider positive, is that the current generation does not settle for infidelity, for unhappiness. The generation of our grandparents and great-grandparents, many times they lived their whole lives in unhappy marriages because first they considered it something usual, and second, marriage was not designed to make you happy. It was designed for other goals like stability, economy, life plans, and offspring. It was very common to see grandparents and great-grandparents who were unhappy and who did not love each other, but who were married and were going to be until the end. Today, that perspective has fortunately changed. That is, if I choose a person, it is so that they can be happy with all those conditions and flaws and whatever, but that there is a project of happiness. I think that's also an important point.
Extremely important, Borja. And thank goodness, because it's true that settling in a relationship that makes you unhappy, I don't see it. It's
my opinion. There are many people who ask.
People often boast about long marriages, with some claiming 50 or even 60 years together, but
let's say what year and
see, exactly. What does that mean? Does it mean they have a hell of a stamina? There can obviously be relationships that are wonderful, where they are super in love.
But they are the exception.
Also, there is another factor that is overlooked, and that is that people evolve differently. Many times you can get along very well with the partner. Imagine at 20 years old, you meet a girl who is 19, 20 years old, and for 10 years she is super happy. But from there, you start to notice that something is lost there that is not. And maybe you have evolved at a pace. This person, you have changed and are no longer the same person. So what you have to do there is that, well, say goodbye with affection and move on to a different stage and not be in that. Yes.
Because when you fall in love, it seems like you fall in love with the person from the beginning, and you often don't consider that this person from the beginning can change and that your infatuation maybe has to change too. Because if not, are you going to say this person is not the one I bought?
No. There are people who stick to the initial picture. People often remain in intolerable relationships because they fixate on how things were at the start. And that's not there anymore. That person is not the same anymore. And then you have to know how to see it and leave.
Is the unfaithful always the executioner and the deceived the victim?
I think there are nuances there. It is...
A question with bad milk. Yes?
Yes. Is it Estella? There are nuances to consider. We have to see what has led one to behave as they have done. We have to see what context that person has in their world. I always say that people should not be judged at first sight for what they do or do not do. Also, there are degrees. There are people who mess with me about this, but I believe that there are degrees
Of infidelity.
Of course, yes. I mean, it's not the same as you premeditating, talking to a person for a month, planning a meeting and going with that person. Then you going out with your friends. One night you get drunk and hook up with someone. I mean, it's wrong. Of course it's wrong, but it's the same, isn't it? It's not the same. I mean, or in a moment of the couple where you are perfect and you go with another person. In a moment where there is a brutal crisis and you go with another person. Is it wrong? Of course it's wrong, but it's the same, isn't it? It's not the same. Why? Because if you and I are fine and you allow yourself to shift the focus outside of the relationship, flirt and get involved with someone else, I will never be able to relax with you in that relationship again. It's not possible. That is, I can forgive you, yes, but if I know that the trust is already broken and I'm going to enter a toxic relationship, no matter how much I love you, I have to put my self-love first and say, I'm not going to take myself into a toxic relationship, and I know I'm going to be in a toxic relationship. I can't trust that person, so I won't allow myself to control anyone or have a hard time for anyone. It's
very exhausting.
So in the end, you have to never lose that self-love. And even though it's hard, you leave, but without blinking, you have to make an act of self-love. And it's very brave to leave someone you love. But is it the best decision you can make? To stay there in a story that you know is going to put you in an absolutely painful situation.
Do men and women cheat for different reasons?
Historically, we have always been different, but nowadays things are becoming much more equal. There's a phrase I say, but it's because I think that way. Historically, men have been more unfaithful out of gluttony. The woman was content at home with her house, wife, and children, creating a sense of calm and peace.
Everything.
Order. And now I allow myself out of gluttony. I allow myself to have a fling. That phrase. There's a phrase that kills me, which is out of sight, out of mind, of course. What the heart feels, the eyes see. What about you? Are you seeing it? Yourself? What are your values? You do know it. Even if the other doesn't know, you know it. And how do you live with yourself if you don't have any kind of value at the beginning? So historically, it has worked more like that. The man acted out of gluttony while the woman reacted to perceived abandonment, which may not be actual abandonment. But the person feels uncared for, unvalued, and unloved. And then the woman, someone suddenly pays attention to her and
she gets hooked.
But it's something deeper, more
emotional and more affectionate. And the man more out of carnal desire, exactly.
More out of gluttony. So historically, it has always been like this. But I insist, things are becoming more equal because we are becoming equal on many levels. And this is one of them. What I hear, the people who talk to me and tell me and so on. Nowadays, I believe that the percentage of unfaithful men and women could be about the same, similar.
Yes, and were there more men than women before?
Yes, there were more men than women before, of course.
As previously mentioned, light hyperconnectivity and social networks significantly influence this matter.
But horrible. I mean, it's a thing.
They will tell you many stories.
They will share shocking stories that make me exclaim, oh my God. But yes, I mean, people who are really having a hard time with social media, with their partners. If you have a partner, it's okay to go out. You don't need to stay in all the time.
I already have friends who have quit social media, for reasons like that, eh?
Yes, because in the end, it's something you say, well, what do you use them for? That's very important. What do you use social media for? So from there, if it bothers your partner, remove it.
Is flirting in 2025 easier or harder than 25 years ago?
I think it's different. Now, there are dating apps, networks that are like Tinder, for example, which is like the trendy nightclub. So 20 years ago, you would go to the nightclub.
You went to the nightclub, the virtual nightclub, right? The
Virtual nightclub is Tinder, right? And then there is, 20 years ago, the physical nightclub, or 30, the physical nightclub, where you would go and get your gaze tangled up over here. Then someone who approached was someone else.
They would take a recognition round. Yes.
They would give it the whole round.
The whore round, yes, I didn't know that there. In Mallorca, it was also called that. Also, I think that
The concept, the term, is universal. So yes, the whole round is given. And then there you could see a bit how the matter was. Not now. The thing is that it is true that it has been modified, obviously, the way when it comes to... It's like a catalog of people, isn't it? It's like a...
is it a catalog? It's kind of dehumanizing, isn't it? It's like an El Corte Inglés catalog, and you go through it. This one, yes. This one, no.
Yes, totally. So you go through and say... And there comes a time when you say, look, here...
You are already here, aren't you?
Yes, it's different. It's also true that it brings people who are more together. Imagine teleworking. I'm going to speak for myself.
A person who doesn't leave the house much. I work from home.
I work in the office, but I work alone. I'm not with a team daily, though there have been times in my life when I have worked with a team. So, of course, I interact when I go out to walk my dog, when I go to the gym. But there is that time when I don't interact with anyone, which is the time I interact with people who work. It's not a context where you'll begin to flirt. Obviously, it's what's appropriate. So is it true that it becomes difficult when you are and interact with fewer people? And the topic of applications, well, this makes it easier for people who do not interact with other people to be able to meet other people. In the end, like everything, it's about using it properly.
Okay, so it's different.
There's just...
Opportunities, but well, many movements also arise, especially in the male sector, the so-called incel. Involuntary celibacy, or incel for short. Well, we talked about it with an anthropologist here in an episode recently, that they are males, as they told, I didn't know much about the movement. Well, they complain that they can't find a partner. They get angry, and now they turn against the world and against women, and they talk about how women are very selective.
The comments with the most hate, the heaviest hate, it's this type of male profile. That is, it's very strong.
Angry that there's too much statuette.
Things like that, very hostile. So then I say poor things, then of course. One of the things I've said in some interviews is that today it's easier than ever to meet people and be with different people. So this profile that you're telling me about goes for my jugular. Those are some...
You?
Is that you? I've been in the red for a long time and haven't tied anything. It's true. It exists.
Let's see, 40 years ago, before...
40 years ago, it was also clear mix.
40 years ago, there was also the one who hooked up a lot, the one who hooked up a little, all life of God. What happens? Well, I don't know. Now it seems that we can all hook up with whoever we want at the click of a button, and that's something that's not so immediate.
No, and besides that, I also don't know, take a little care of the aesthetics of the photo. I don't know. There are people...
There are things, right? But yes, I understand
where you're coming from.
Another relational issue that causes much pain? Well, I would say the breakups, what imprint does it leave on the body at a physical level? A breakup?
Very powerful, Borja. The breakup causes a sudden plummet of dopamine, of oxytocin, of all the good vibe neurotransmitters. There is a brutal drop and a brutal rise at the same time of cortisol. So this, to begin with, is brutal. And then it has also been seen that there is a cardiac affection, the broken heart syndrome, which is called that occurs. There is a part of the heart that starts to beat differently. It becomes deregulated. There is a possibility that the person is given beta blockers in the hospital because it is very similar to a heart attack in symptoms. Then this is not so delicate, but it is suffered at a physiological level, and a sentimental breakup affects both psychological and physiological levels, extending beyond just the emotional impact to the physical plane. It reaches the body suffers. That's why it's so important to have a protective environment. This is very curious, Borja. Here's what I'm seeing. That the woman, historically, we have communicated a lot among ourselves. We give each other a lot of emotional coverage, but men do not. So many men who talk to me and contact me and tell me, is it that I find it so good to talk to you? Because I have no one to talk to. It's sad when his colleague tells him, come on, dude, don't overthink it.
That's the level of help we give each other. This is
The maximum coverage.
pat on the back, or are we going to get drunk? Exactly, don't you?
Worry, there's plenty. Maybe the person needs to share their experience. Oh, this happened to me. And us, on the contrary, if there's a breakup, a friend breaks up, and you go to dinner.
And talking 3 hours, 4 hours.
Well, I'm not going to dinner directly. It's a joke.
Because it puts you in the
Head, it's not a joke. And we have that logistical support with each other, but not men, because men have been educated in a different way. And I notice that lack today in men. I notice that they need to modify that style of bond with friends. That is, the friend should not only be the colleague you go to play soccer and have a few beers with, but also your confidant. How are we one of the others? Why do you need to talk when there's a breakup, just like women do?
Yes, we need to vomit things out, and it's very unpleasant, the feeling of having to vomit and not being able to.
They can't. No, because of that.
I equate it to when you're really sick to your stomach, you want to vomit, and you can't, and you can't. Yes, that's when people often turn to dangerous or destructive coping behaviors. I'm not even talking about the typical ones like alcohol and drugs, but also excessive exercise. There are countless ways men use to escape, which is quite masculine and hurtful. Some women likely do this too, but it's all on, as you say, not channeling emotional expression as it should be done. It can't be everything. This one's going to come out.
I used to think that was good a few years ago. Once in Ibiza, while having wine alone at the Cappuccino where my friend worked, I noticed 5 guys at the next table. And they were discussing football, including player signings and other related topics. And suddenly one said, well, dude, how are you? And the other one said, well, I don't know. We were together for 7 years before he abruptly ended the relationship. I don't have any other choice because he was right there.
Quiet. I was alone. I was alone
and had no choice but to listen to him. They changed the subject, thankfully, and talked about the matter. Borja said to take 2 minutes, 3 at most. Come on, dude, don't freak out.
It's just what we have. We have very few tools, and
they changed and changed. And I said, put it on. Well, at that moment, I thought, wow, hats off. Because a friend breaks up, and that breakup monopolizes the attention for 7 dinners. I mean, these entire 7 dinners. Do you believe he has acquired something specific? I've witnessed it numerous times, though not extensively, nor so bold. But it is true that there is a lack of that emotional coverage between you. Exercising that, the power to vent, because I notice it a lot. Most of the people, the men, hire me and talk to me because of that issue, and they have a really hard time with it. And I notice when they talk, their gaze transforms. They feel relief.
And
then they start talking to me. It's been good for me. Thank goodness I can tell you. It's like among women we don't tell. It's that this among women we don't tell. Among us. We have another way of functioning. This needs to be modified.
Things are slowly improving, but much work remains. How long does it typically take to get over a breakup?
It depends. It's very relative for some people. It depends on the depth of the relationship. It depends on the style of the person, also on how the person operates. You have to wean the body off the emotions that person caused you, and then wean the mind. Your brain will conjure up idealized images of the relationship to lure you back. And that becomes an internal struggle. Even if the relationship was messy, the brain, preferring familiarity, will send idyllic images to encourage you to return to it. Stay alert and be prepared for what's coming. Remain strong in the face of adversity. The outcome depends on your readiness. There are people who can overcome it in a month, people who take 6 months. But that saying that one nail drives out another nail is a lie. One nail that drives out another nail lives in someone else's hole. They are living in someone else's hole. You're not getting anything out. That's not how it works.
The no contact rule is very trendy now. I had never heard of this term a year ago, but now suddenly it's everywhere. Is no contact always the solution, or can you get over a breakup in a more or less healthy way without having to go no contact?
I believe that the healthiest thing is no contact. Personally, I think that's the healthiest thing. Because if not, you're always in an emotional back and forth, caught between two stools. and you don't give your body space to get used to that body chemistry that person produces in you, you don't give your mind space to generate that detoxification. So after a certain amount of time, yes, of course, I am friends with my exes. I have no problem. Except for some who say it can be done. There are some
that there's no way.
Who directly say, why bother? He's not a good person.
It was the next question. Fair, can you maintain a good relationship with your ex and even become friends? It was the next question.
Absolutely. Me. There are exes with whom I am friends, but they tell me about their breakups. They tell me about their, of course.
That's nice in a way. Of course it is.
Very nice because, look, this happened to me. And look, well, I spoke with one not long ago and he told me that his last 3 relationships had been unfaithful to him. He asked me, what do you think this is? I mean, can you be friends with your exes? I believe 0 contact at the beginning is necessary. Until the intensity of the emotions decreases, those emotions from the bond dissipate. And then if they are a good person, why not? Is it wonderful? In fact, before I started to spread the word, there was a moment when I wanted to reinvent myself professionally. I made a list of things, several columns. One is, what do I like to do? Another, what do people around me think? What am I good at doing and what makes money or is monetizable? So I asked my surroundings and among them some ex. Hey, what do you think I'm good at doing? I asked those close to me, the people who truly know me about my children, and they gave me their opinion and they all agreed on one thing. Are you good at public speaking? I said, if they all agree, then I'm going to look for something. Can you make money? I mean, am I going to look for something? So if I support myself, for example, talking about exes in...
I mean, it's quite mature and quite beautiful that you can get to. But I do understand that there is an acute emergency phase in which if you are continually scratching that scab of repair, the thing takes longer to heal.
That's right. The metaphor is perfect. Are you picking at the scab all the time? Leave the scab, let it heal, let the tissue close, and then from there, if he is a good person...
Why not? During the emergency phase, the initial 2 months, which were the most challenging, what do you generally recommend in a breakup? What can we do in terms of self-care? What do you recommend? Besides no contact?
Besides no contact, I suggest making a list of all the things they have done to show the relationship doesn't work.
That it doesn't work? No, the ones that work, it...
Leave it nice. Leave it. What has not worked? What it has done is that it has triggered that breakup, whether it's something that has been gradual or something that has been sudden. A disappointment, like a betrayal, should be emphasized with capital letters, voice notes, and reminders everywhere to prevent the brain from sending idyllic images of the person who caused it. Oh, that day we watched the sunset, the brain is going to do that dirty trick. So, no. Keep the list in mind. What about that person makes you feel bad, or what have they done to cause the relationship problems? And keep it in mind and forgive yourself when you falter. And understand that you're going to have many temptations to talk to that person, to respond to that person. And there you're going to have to set limits for yourself. You have to have that internal struggle in mind and be aware that you're going through a detox period from that relationship. It's hard, especially when you love that person, because if you don't love them, it's quite easy. But when you're in love with someone and you decide to leave for a matter of self-love, to say no, I'm leaving because I don't want a toxic relationship. And I know it will be difficult for me to stay. So can you leave while still loving someone very much? Leaving that relationship while still loving someone very much is very difficult, but it's very mature in that case.
And Bego always talks about the mourning, about overcoming the breakup with the partner, but peripherally, other mournings are generated that are talked about less. Now, for example, other elements tied to your partner like father-in-law, mother-in-law, brother-in-law, pets, common friends, common places. What happens with all those mornings?
It gets complicated because you not only miss the person, you miss the environment. It's like you leave behind one life and start a different one. Many people, especially those resistant to and terrified of change, suffer greatly as a result. Some people change us when they change. Gives us life, and people for whom changes paralyze them or they don't like them. So, of course, having to give up not only relationships, environments, mutual friends, and dogs all significantly impact breakups. I mean, in my neighborhood, I who have a dog and who socialize a lot, because my dog is very friendly and greets everyone. There are some with shared custody, but I know 3. So sometimes you see them with one, then with another, or sometimes you don't see them for a month. And is it because they have shared custody of the puppies? Yes.
I think it was something before. So the very own of the children has extended to the pets, because it's normal. Well, I understand it perfectly. Yes, they are family, of course. Yes, it's the breakup. It's a vital moment. I think it's the only one in which your present collapses, your future also collapses, or what you thought was going to be your future. And also, you do a reinterpretive analysis of your past, don't you? That is, you ask yourself what you have done well, what you have done wrong. You start to dwell a lot on your past with that person. So it's a moment of crisis, but crisis from many places. Maybe that's why breakups also make you grow so much, because you rebuild yourself, you
Rebuild yourself. You've said it yourself. You have to rebuild yourself again. And in the end, Borja, the most interesting people are those who have had some dark nights. And a breakup is a dark night.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we're wrapping up, but I want you to tell us a little about your basal metabolic rate method, right? How do you manage it? How do you do it?
Well, the basal metabolic rate is a system that I've created to reprogram at a mental level, and I use techniques like morning meditation. I send them an audio that teaches them how to meditate. Most people don't know how to meditate, and when someone is very accelerated, getting them to meditate is extremely difficult and complicated. But if you play with the silences in the words, you force the brain in that impasse to meditate. You put it without realizing it. So there are several meditations that go spacing the silences a little more until the person learns to silence the noise and learns to meditate. Nowadays, everyone wants to learn to meditate. 20 years ago, it was considered weird, and now it's not. Researchers have discovered neurogenesis in the orbitofrontal cortex and hippocampus, and that the amygdala relaxes. It slows down quite a bit. Today, people want to learn meditation, so that's what I teach first. Then there are a series of tools like gratitude, for example, which has also been found to produce neurogenesis. It's mind-blowing to start with gratitude. To give thanks. Has all this been discovered now? With technology, the technique, functional magnetic resonance techniques. They understand the brain's functioning, the triggers and inhibitors for various actions, most importantly, and what weighs most within the mental reprogramming of my system, specifically, the basal metabolic rate are the night audios. There, it's amazing. There I have a WhatsApp community, and there I put some from time to time. They give me feedback, and they tell me that I used to take sleeping pills, and now I'm sleeping soundly. And I never finished listening to the audio. It's perfect because it comes if you don't finish listening to it, on a conscious level, your subconscious is hearing it and internalizing it. In addition, you're putting the message in there, and then there are different messages depending on what the person is. In a hypnotic-like state, the person is reprogrammed repeatedly, night after night, until they start to modify their beliefs.
That's what I was going to tell you. They are generic messages, but then there are subcategories. Yes, there are.
The basal metabolic rate has 5 subcategories, including one for procrastination and another for improve relationships with yourself and your partner. Become your best self physically and mentally. There are several ways to achieve this.
Subcategories? Yes.
There are several subcategories. And I tell people that once they learn to modify one, then they can modify all the others. So what I do there is I leave all the subcategories in the course, in the basal metabolic rate, all the subcategories are there, and I tell them to choose one. Don't confuse me. It's crucial or we won't generate. I insist it ends.
With one and...
Of course, it ends with one and starts with another. Building a new road requires paving, transiting, and circulating for a while so that your brain takes you there instead of the old route. So if you one night hear an audio and the next you hear something else, another audio, let's see. It's going to be good for you because you're going to rest better, that's for sure, because it slows you down a lot. Just hearing the voice, the frequency of the music, the tone of my voice, I change the tone of the voice, and moreover, the human voice especially. Very curious. I recently concluded this. The female voice is like your mother's, a voice that accompanies and lulls you to sleep, carrying you away. And that's the particularity of the audios that I make, which I also make with my heart, or...
I give it my all. Yes, besides, do you listen to it too? Yes, I make them.
I started making them for myself, and I was like, wow, because I give everything. I offer my employees resources that I have personally utilized. From the technique of repairing the inner child to systems of eliminating energies, for example. There is an audio in which I do a guided visualization towards a basement that symbolizes that inner space of yours where you arrive. And suddenly everything is chaotic, full of boxes of guilt, of fear. And then we do a job of let's clean all this up. I've done all that with myself. I mean, I never put anything in the basal metabolic rate that I haven't done with myself. Well, that's good.
How good? Well, nothing. We reached the end of the interview. We have learned it has gone super fast. I don't know how long we have been, but well, it has gone very fast. That is a good sign. Thank you for all your teachings. It's been fascinating, Borja. You are always welcome here. This is your home. You know that.
Thank you very much, Borja.
And that's it, to the audience. I also want to personally thank you because we are approaching 100 recorded episodes, and it has been an incredible journey where we have learned a lot. I hope you have too. And that's all, as always. If you found it useful, then share it with friends and family. See you in the next episode. A big hug and keep empowering.